So this is the iPhone 16e, and honestly, when this phone first launched, I was like, I ain't reviewing it. I mean, it starts at $599 US. It has an outdated design, a single camera, and a 60Hz display, and all of these are aspects that, on paper at least, are pretty inexcusable for a phone of this price in 2025. But then I decided, you know what, I'm a phone reviewer, this is my job. I've got to take the bad with the good, right? So I decided to use it for a week, and I reckon I've actually got a somewhat controversial take on this phone. Let's dive in. All right, starting with its design. And honestly, there's actually quite a lot to like about its design. I'm a big fan of its size. I love that we get both a matte finish on the back and on the side panels too. All the buttons are super premium and clicky, so without question, it's definitely a really well-built phone. I will just note, it doesn't have those rounded off side rails that were introduced with the 15 Pro series, so it does feel a little sharper in the hand, kind of like the older iPhone 12, 13, and 14 devices, but if you're going to be putting it in a case, then this is obviously a non-issue. There are just two noticeable gripes that I have with this phone's design, the first of which is the camera bump. I mean, if you're gonna go with a single camera setup with a very minimal design like this, then at least make the camera flush with the back of the phone to completely eliminate any side-to-side wobble when using the phone flat on a table. And then second, man, do we have to go back to a notch design? I mean, sure, it's certainly more modern than the previous iPhone SE design, but man, I just thought that we were past notches, and beyond the design aspect, I actually miss the functionality that comes from having the dynamic island. The good news is that this phone does have Face ID, which works just about as well as any other iPhone I've used. And then on top of that, I'm really happy to report that the haptics are virtually identical, if not exactly the same, as its flagship brothers, which is amazing. And then we come to the display on this phone. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the first of two really big drawbacks with this phone. Now look, it is OLED, so that's good. The colors are also fantastic, so that's also really good, but it's also quite a bit dimmer at its max brightness compared to other iPhone devices, as well as almost every other Android phone at this price point, with a max brightness of 800 nits when high brightness mode is activated. But it can't even sustain that level for very long. It just auto dims after about 15 seconds, making it really hard to see in bright sunlight with sunglasses on. So that in and of itself is pretty underwhelming, but then the sucker punch is that it's also 60 Hertz. And look, if you've never used a 90 or 120 Hertz panel before, then this is honestly not really a problem, but as someone who moves between several devices, all of which except this one are 120 Hertz, I will tell you right now that you can absolutely tell that this phone has a 60 Hertz panel, and I defy anyone who says otherwise. Oh, and the other huge downside is that because of the outdated display technology, it has no always-on display. I mean, this aspect alone is enough to make me not want to use this phone long term. Now, the upside to this lackluster display is that the battery life is simply incredible. I'm talking like 8 to 10 hours of screen on time with heavy use, which for me surpasses pretty much every phone that I've used in the past few years. Would I gladly trade worse battery life for a 120Hz screen? You bet you damn well I would, but alas, it wasn't to be. The only disappointment in relation to the battery is the lack of MagSafe charging, but given how long it's taken for the Android world to add support for Qi 2 magnetic charging, at least on all the major releases, I'm personally not really invested into the MagSafe ecosystem at all, so it hasn't been that big of an issue for me personally. And honestly, I can't really see anyone who's already using a MagSafe-enabled iPhone upgrading to the iPhone 16e, so I can't imagine it being an issue for that many people either. I'm just glad it still has wireless charging. Now, the second big downside to getting this phone compared to, well, any other phone on the market, let alone any other iPhone on the market, is the significant sacrifice that you'll be making in regards to camera versatility. So unlike any phone that we've seen in a long time, the iPhone 16e has a single 48 megapixel rear shooter. And let me tell you, it has been a bigger bummer than I was anticipating. I mean, it's just so limiting in terms of how creative you can get with your shots, and you end up with pictures all from a very similar angle. And coming from the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, which had the best cameras that I've used on a phone in a long time, to this, I mean, not only is the versatility lacking, but even just the end results, they're pretty tame as well. That being said, it does deserve credit for being a very, very reliable camera shooting experience. I mean, I was interchanging between this and the Nothing 3A Pro during my testing, and despite that phone having an ultra-wide lens and a very capable telephoto lens on paper, the camera shooting experience itself was very unreliable. And I actually think that frustrated me more than the lack of versatility when using the iPhone 16e. I'll get into more of that in my in-depth review of the Nothing 3A Pro, so subscribe so you don't miss that when it goes live. But yeah, as far as the camera experience on this phone goes, look, I don't love it, I wouldn't call it fun to use, and I don't even love the end results, but it is reliable and it doesn't miss a beat, which, as I said, it does deserve credit for. Now, the last thing to talk about is the software, but here's the thing, as to be expected, it's pretty much identical to any other iPhone that you can get on the market. And this is the real benefit to being an iPhone owner as far as I'm concerned. Whether you have the most expensive iPhone or the cheapest iPhone, it's going to be virtually the same software experience across the board, which can't be said for most Android phones on the market. Now, I do find it interesting that we're up to iOS 18.4 and we still don't have most of the heavily promoted Apple Intelligence features first promoted with the iPhone 16 series last year, and which is one of the biggest selling points of this phone too. But I've got to be honest with you, I'm not a big user of AI stuff, even when a phone does have it all put together, and I'm not a big Siri user too. So yeah, it's odd that it keeps getting delayed, but I'm not going to spend this whole video talking about it because it just doesn't impact me all that much. What I will briefly mention are a few tips that I found have made my time using the iPhone 16e just that little bit better. Firstly, I know that, like me, most people find this new paginated control center layout first introduced with iOS 18 a real pain. And honestly, I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but I actually discovered that you can just remove the extra pages, leaving just one page of toggles remaining, and this makes the experience so much better. No more accidental swiping through the pages when I'm trying to just swipe home. Also, if you're someone, again, like me, who loves using custom icons, then you can actually hide those annoying shortcut banners that normally show whenever you launch a shortcut by simply adding this nothing action before your open app action. Once you do that, opening your custom shortcuts will look like this. And I mean, how good is that? Oh, and by the way, if you want to recreate this beautiful custom home screen setup that you've been seeing throughout this video, then I actually created an in-depth tutorial showcasing the entire process, which I'll link up in the cards and down in the description below. I will also say the software experience on the iPhone 16e has continued the trend of iOS 18 being the buggiest version of iOS to have ever existed, with the control center often causing the most issues, and I'm still seeing springboard crashes, moving icons around on the home screen is still a nightmare, and that's not to mention a litany of other little quirks here and there. Plus, this is all on top of the big software complaints that I made in my review of the iPhone 16 Pro last year, which I won't go into again in this video, but I'll link it up in the cards in case you want to check it out, but none of which have been addressed with the iPhone 16e. At the end of the day though, as I said, this is the full version of iOS, and buggy or not, the fact that I can get the latest, most future-proof version of iOS without having to spend over $1,000, that is a proper selling point, and to be honest, this is actually where my potentially hot take about this phone comes in. So here's the thing, for anyone looking for a feature-rich iPhone with a fantastic display and a super versatile camera system, just straight up, this ain't the phone for you. That being said, there are two groups of people that I think this iPhone could actually be really great for. Firstly, if you're an iOS user who A, doesn't care about cameras, B, prefers a smaller phone, and C, hasn't used a 120Hz display before, then this could actually be the perfect option for you because it ticks all those boxes and it's super future-proof, so it'll last you a long time. That being said, if you fall into that category and can either stretch your budget a couple $100 or you're open to going refurbished, like I found a refurbished iPhone 14 Pro in excellent condition for about the same price as a brand new 16e, then honestly, I'd suggest going for something like that, or even the base iPhone 16 itself instead. But if you don't want to spend more than $600 and you're not keen on going down the refurbished route, then the 16e is still a pretty solid option. The other group that this phone could be great for, and this is an even smaller demographic, but it's for anyone looking for a second phone, maybe for work or development purposes, and again, you're looking for as much future-proofing as possible. Personally, I'd still probably go refurbished, but the iPhone 16e definitely isn't a bad choice. Just don't expect more than the basics because that's really all you're getting. But that's my thoughts on the iPhone 16e. Let me know what you reckon down in the comments below. And as I said, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to see my thoughts on the Nothing 3A Pro, because that's the phone that I'm testing and reviewing right as we speak. Aside from that, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will catch you later.